Welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. This week's guest is such an amazing guy. I actually first met him probably 12 years ago when he worked for the government in the United Kingdom. He's one of the people who set up the Office of Low Emission Vehicles, OLEV, which is an organisation, a kind of government organisation that has encouraged and very greatly influenced the infrastructure, the manufacturing of electric vehicles in this country, particularly Nissan, the Nissan Leaf at the Sunderland Nissan factory. All that, they're very, very involved with all those things really, really early on. Electrification of buses, of public transport, of delivery vehicles. Michael has been involved in all that. So I should introduce him, Michael Hurwitz, who now works for TfL, has done for many years. TfL is Transport for London, so that is the London mayoral office. So his boss is the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who we've interviewed, in fact, on Fully Charged. And so he's involved in maintaining the transport network in London. Well, clearly this year has been an extraordinary turnaround. It's the first time in the history of transport in London where all the numbers have plummeted. There's still, he actually mentions it, I believe, there's still very few people using the London Tube network or the subway, the underground, whatever you want to call it. There's still less than half, I think, on the buses. Taxis are busy when they are busy, but there's very few people moving around still. So this year is exceptional, but there are immense moves afoot, as you will hear, in the transformation of how we move ourselves and how we move goods around Europe's only megacity, which London is. Regardless of anything else, London has a population of over 10 million, which makes it a megacity. And I always think of sort of London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris, Madrid, being roughly the same size. London is hugely bigger. It's just massively, monstrously, mind-numbingly enormous, and really sucks the rest of this beleaguered isle. All the energy goes into London. You're talented and you're young and you want to get ahead and you want to do things. What do? You don't go to Barnsley. I'm sorry, you don't go to Mytholmroyd or I don't know, anyway. You go to London. And it's so sad in a way that's the way this country works. It's very, very centralised. And the influence London has and the way that it sucks our cultural energy from the rest of the country is something that many people have discussed. And it's not something that Michael and I discuss in this episode, because he is very London. And even though I lived there for many years, I'm very not London. But you can't not love London. It's an extraordinary city. What's happening there now is amazing, the transformation that's going on. We'll be doing a lot more stuff about it next year on the regular Fully Charged show. But talking to Michael is fascinating. I want him to be a regular, guest on the Fully Charged show podcast because he's so interesting in his insights and his knowledge of the transition of our transport system from burning fossils to using sensibly electrons is really interesting. So without further ado, although I would just quickly, just before we start, don't try and skip ahead because you won't know how far to go. I might be going on for 3 seconds or an hour. I just want to say, please do subscribe to this podcast because we always put this bit at the end. And of course, who listens to that? I don't. I listen to podcasts all the time. Never. When the person goes, oh yeah, and also do subscribe to you, off next. So I'm just going to say at the beginning, just to be annoying, please subscribe to this podcast. Please watch Fully Charged Show on YouTube, fullychargedshow.com. No. Not fullychargedshow.com. Sorry, what am I saying? Well, you can go to fullycharged.show, which is our fabulous webpage with everything linked to everything we do is on there. But we're on youtube.com/fullychargedshow for some of the very few people who found this podcast who know nothing about the 600 plus episodes we've put out on YouTube, covering everything from wind up electric generators to electric aeroplanes. I think that's probably the two extremes I can think of now. So, go and have a look at that if you haven't seen it and subscribe to that as well. And if you're even feeling even more generous, and this is a thing that so many people are asking for, but I'm staggered that we get any support at all, is we use Patreon. Patreon is very important to us. Our supporters on Patreon are incredibly patient, sustained, generous. It's amazing. I'm really, really grateful for them, because there's no, I think in the past I've said it would be very hard to do what we do without Patreon, which was always true. This year it would have been impossible. We would have stopped making the show in probably about the middle of May. We could not have carried on, and we've all had to, everyone has been in the same boat. Certainly not a complaint, but it has happened. So if you have any inclination, you can give us 50 cents a month. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. Anything is gratefully received. It does help us. Strangely enough, the people who work on Fully Charged have to do things like eat, pay the rent, feed their children. I know, selfish, self-obsessed, liberal tree huggers, all of them. Anyway, that's enough. Now let's go and have a listen and a chat with Michael Hurwitz from Transport for London. My Energy is putting the I back into British innovation. My Energy is putting the I back into inventing the future. My Energy is putting the I back into inspiring a nation. Recharging the world with green, smart energy. Charge your EV with your PV and more. Visit myenergy.com and help to spark the green revolution. My Energy, driving the charge to a greener future. So, Michael, thank you very much for joining us, because I want the listeners to know, how special this time is, because I know you're a man under enormous pressure, 24/7. You're always on. I mean, could you get an emergency call now? I find this quite exciting. If there was a major incident.
So, okay. So what you're talking about, Robert, is every now and again, so I work for Transport for London, and every now and again I get to be on the gold command rotor in case there's major incident. And so I'm not on this week. However,
right.
I am actually currently helping to coordinate what TfL are doing to help the NHS on the mass vaccination programme. Right. So it is unlikely, right, but it is still technically possible. But that phone could ring.
But so at the moment, so this is for you. I always have to remind myself that we have listeners all around the world, for which I'm incredibly grateful and quietly proud. So it's always important to kind of explain the context. But at the moment, you work for TfL, which is Transport for London, which is the authority that kind of controls all. Basically, well, what does it control? All the transport. I just think of it as the subway and buses, and well, it does a whole load of things. It actually doesn't do a couple of
relevant things for the future transport. So it runs the tube, it runs underground. It contracts out all the buses, so it sets all the bus routes. We do Oyster card ticketing, the congestion charge. We license taxis, or sometimes famously we don't license taxis, and there's a whole range of other things like overground rail, policy. We have a huge commercial development arm. Actually, we own one of the biggest landlords in the whole of London.
Right.
And we are the integrated highways authority. But it's actually interesting. There's a couple of really important things we don't do. So, firstly, we don't get to set what's allowed on the roads or not. So deciding whether e-scooters are legal is a national government thing.
Right.
Similarly, there are actually London is composed of 34 highways authorities. That's us, the City of London, and 32 London boroughs.
Wow.
So, like local parking, if we get like an amazing company with a brilliant, parking technology, and say, hey, we're going to solve the problems, and I say, wow, I've got a list of 33 other people you need to speak to and convince. So but we are, I think, like amongst the most integrated transport authority of any major city in the world.
Right. Yeah.
But with that, it comes, big operational responsibility. I forgot to say, we run all the traffic lights. All the traffic lights from a there is a control centre in the centre of London. It kind of, I always say to people, it looks exactly how you expect on the movies.
Yeah.
But just with a low ceiling, like in the Bond movies,
it would be a huge ceiling.
There's huge mezzanine layer of people at the top.
Yeah.
It's just a floor of an office block,
Right.
But it's exactly what you expect. You know, everyone's there. Services, extremely talented people managing the network, people doing buses, managing the tunnels. So we run all of that. We are responsible for keeping London moving. Literally.
But then I met you. I can't think how long ago it is, but probably 10 plus, at least 10 years ago, if not more.
Yeah.
And you were then working for what I would call central government, for the UK national government. You're working for the government in the UK, and that would be. So you are. This is, I think, the interesting thing is people walk around or complain about or don't notice charging infrastructure or slight changes in the way that we have electric vehicles, and there's grants to help people buy them and all that. You were absolutely integrally involved in all those decisions and changes to kind of government law. I mean, back I don't even know when. I mean, tell us about that, because that's a bit, I kind of know that you were there, but I don't really know in detail what you were doing and what your role was.
So, I mean, look, ministers take decisions and you always have a team around you, right? But, I basically started it and in the UK. And this was actually back to about 2008.
Right.
When, I started in the private sector. I moved into central government essentially to do, kind of corporate things like helping run projects better and do proper planning and things like that. And then it was around the time when the UK government was developing what is now the Climate Change Act.
Right.
I was really passionate about this agenda anyway, and I've kind of elbowed my way into to help shape the environment policy. This was a big thing that we weren't doing. I'd come in to be the programs guy, and I'd say, well, look, why don't you let me say what it would mean to have a meaningful program to decarbonise transport in the UK? And so, okay, it started off. The first thing I did was make a case to start funding of low carbon technologies through Innovate UK. So, we've got 100 million quid from the Treasury to start that process of giving money to Innovate UK to say, right, how are we going to develop this capability in the UK? Because at that time anyway, the automotive industry was they were saying it was hollowed out. It wasn't taking any big R&D decisions here. It wasn't really supporting capability. So we started with that. And then, essentially over a few years, I made the case for electrifying the transport system.
Right.
I was the one that, and my teams that convinced central government to set up OLEV, to start subsidising vehicles, to start the vast expansion of the R&D programme.
So just
plug-in car grant. So we set it. We did that. Plus things like there was the Green Bus Fund, and I also oversee things like biofuels policy. And so I left as, I guess, the most senior government official on everything low carbon in transport.
Right. I mean, because I just wanted to quickly, it's a reminder to myself as well to explain. The two things I want you to explain is what Innovate UK is and what OLEV stands for. Because I think because I know. I
apologise.
I do the same thing.
No. So Innovate UK is the UK government's essentially funding agency for innovation, grant and support. So it sits at arm's length from government, and then it channels and runs open processes to give money to industry for innovation and investments in R&D.
Yeah.
And then the OLEV is the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, which I believe, is it changing its name to OZEV, the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles?
When I looked that up, I couldn't. Yeah, that's what we were told, but then I couldn't see any sign of it. So they haven't publicly announced it.
I don't know. Okay,
I did a deep Google, but I could see no sign of OZEV because I just thought, oh, that's really cool. But yes, officer. So I mean, those, just to explain to listeners, over the last 10 years, a lot of the fully charged episodes that I've done have been with companies that received an Innovate UK support, and then a lot of stuff through OLEV. I mean, that's where a lot of particularly early on.
Yeah,
that's really where I was very involved.
And at that time, I mean, you remember this, so I'd come into government as like an outsider, and it was really interesting. At that time, Nissan was trying to work out where to put the Leaf, where to make the Nissan Leaf in Europe. And then the way government would work is that, there were multiple parts of government that would be involved in that. So there was obviously the Department for Transport, Business Department. At that time, there was a separate Energy Department. There was somebody else that did other bits of research funding, and it was a bit of a like merry-go-round for people outside or for companies outside about how do you deal with this. But also within government, I came in, it was like, well, this is electrifying the transport system.
Yeah,
is this massive issue. It's environmental. It's about industry. We need funding. It's about transport. And one of the strengths of British government is that you have this cabinet. Everybody has to agree everything, but that means you have to kind of write round and get everyone's opinion. And there's the slightly naive, outsider came in and said, "This is bonkers. Can't we, rather than writing to everybody, can't we just write it once and get everyone from those departments in one room?" And it was actually this radical thing where we set up the Office of Low Emission Vehicles. When you see in government the Office of, it means it's a cross-cutting issue that affects lots of people's agendas. And I said, well, look, let's just get everyone together. And it was this really radical move at the time. And I think one of the cool things about it is that all the other governments started copying that.
Right.
Germany did it next. It was a really great moment when we'd set up this program of consumer incentives and then research and then infrastructure funding. And it was kind of cool when the People's Republic of China significantly copied what we'd done on the incentive program, and it was like, oh, cool.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
So when you hear the word the Office of, and there's others, there's the Office of Life Sciences, the Office for AI, it's a really big, because technology doesn't sit within traditional boundaries of government departments.
No.
And every now and again, you just need to get everybody relevant in the same room. So I set up that structure so that the UK could really accelerate. And it's been amazing. And actually, the announcements in the last couple of weeks about the banning of buying internal combustion engines from 2030 and
that's 9 years away really now, isn't it? It's very soon.
Well, it's close. I mean, the time it took, as you and I have spoken about before, we were sort of the nutty weirdos in the back of the pub, talking about how electric cars are the answer. And it's the same time. The industry were trying to stop us doing it at the time.
Yeah.
And the shift between now and then, in just 10 years, is it's amazing to see it happen. But it's possible. That's the key learning. It really is possible.
That's certainly the thing I've been saying, because when that announcement came out, I received a really surprisingly fulfilling and optimistic a level of, oh, this is amazing, what an amazing thing to do, this is great, I can't wait for this to happen, blah blah blah. Very supportive of that government announcement, and I knew that it would take a few days, and then I started to get the negative stuff. Well, I can't charge a car at my house, and I never will be able to, it's rubbish, and I love my diesel, all those things, which is fine. But my only argument for that is, people say the infrastructure isn't ready. That's the most common. We can't all switch to electric vehicles. The infrastructure isn't ready. And I just want to point out, today, today, Prime Minister Johnson said, you can't drive a combustion car again. That's it. It's against the law. You'll be arrested if you do. You've got to drive an electric vehicle. The infrastructure is hopelessly inadequate at the moment, and there aren't any cars. So it's a ridiculous notion. But when you look back to 10 years ago, and I'd like to verify this with you, but at that time, I can only remember one, maybe it was 12 years ago, but one rapid charger in the country. I went to see it in Cirencester. And it was behind a locked gate. You had to ring up and get an appointment to go and use it. And it never worked. And all the instructions are in Japanese. It was a CHAdeMO charger for a Mitsubishi iMEV. And it was always broken and very unreliable. But that was not that long ago. And now I think there's something like 7,000 or 8,000 rapid charger sites, with about 12,000 actual rapid chargers in the UK in that 10 years. Well, in another 10 years, it's impossible for us to even imagine what it's like. But just yesterday, we went to the Gridserve opening of the Gridserve charging hub in Braintree. And you've got to go and see it.
Idea.
You've got to go and see it. It is extraordinary. It opens on Monday, but it's 36 rapid chargers in one site under a solar canopy with a cafe and the toilets and really nice loos and Wi-Fi and a showroom and shops.
Just for that.
Yeah. Just it's worth going just for the loo. Yeah. But and the thing about it is you can go there. You've never used an electric car before. You've never driven one. You don't know anything about it. You drive in there, and there'll be someone there to help you. You're not out on your own at the back of a car park, round by the bins with one rapid charger and you've never used it before. So there was a couple of people there, came there yesterday. It's not officially open, but they just saw it and they were in their electric cars and they came in, and there was there's staff, like you would have in a garage, and they tell you how to plug it in and how to use it. And it's really, anyway, but that change in that 10 years to imagine what it would be like in 2030 and the range of cars available. I mean, there were no cars when we first talked. I can remember talking to you, I think at the Millennium Dome, as it was known. I don't even know. It's got the O2 Arena. There was some event. I remember talking to you there, and there was a Mitsubishi i-MiEV or a Tesla Roadster. I mean, that was it.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. I mean, I think the fact that Gridserve are doing that in that place, it shows you what's happening. You could see it happening in the last couple of years. Is that I mean, amazingly, all of the stuff back from 10 years ago. I think there was an article I read that was very influential for me. It was a paper from WWF, World Wildlife Fund. I think it's called "Plugged In: The End of the World," or something like that. Just talking about the basic energy efficiency of internal combustion engine versus electrification, and the fundamental physics, made sense then, and it still makes sense now.
Yeah.
But what you're seeing is that in those days, it was people that had to have like a really big vision to go for it, possibly from a policy point of view or a principle point of view. But then I would say about 2 years ago, everyone's saying, we're looking at price parity by 2025. Who knows how quickly battery costs are going to go down? But everyone's saying around 2025. I think was it UBS I think said 2024 in a report the other week. And a couple of years ago, it started to come into the time horizon for people who are looking for quite distant financial returns. They can say, "Oh, hold on, if in 7 years I can start to make money, then I'm thinking about investing now." And I think what people like Gridserve and others have done is really double down. Because it's this question of the beauty of it is that if you're just putting in charging infrastructure, that's a tough business model because you've got, grid reinforcement costs, installing the kit, buying the kit, maintaining the kit, maybe renting the parking space, all that kind of stuff. I think the great thing about Gridserve is that adding potentially complementary business models alongside it. So, you by adding energy storage in there, you can be smart management, demand side response, selling capacity back to the grid. I think they've got generation there, haven't they? They've got linked it to.
They've got only solar. I mean, they have. But it's 200 kilowatts on the buildings, so it's not insignificant. It's not enough for what they're, when if there's 36 cars charging there, which there was yesterday, that's quite a lot. That's about 5
But you still get quite a lot of electric.
And they have up to now been installing solar farms, so that's their business. So their power is coming from their solar farms. But you're absolutely right. It is I think the batteries, which you can't even see when you go there, they're behind a fence. They've got 6 megawatt hours of battery capacity on the site, which is, by the standards that we would have imagined in 2010, mind-bogglingly huge.
Well, and the batteries are getting so much cheaper. I think the interesting thing is a play like, that's a fantastic system. What I'd really like, and I think one of the things that will really unlock it, is if you can create that kind of business model in a city environment, where the land costs so much more. Because in the traditional, I guess, urban centre approach of making money on land is, you'll put like, I don't know, convenience store on the bottom floor, like Tesco Metro in the UK, and a block of flats on top, right? And per square foot, that earns a lot of money. And I think actually, is there a version of what Gridserve have done? I guess in a more suburban
urban. I mean, the only one I know of at the moment, which is Shell, and they haven't announced it. I mean, I know they're doing it, and they have told me on numerous times they're doing it. They won't even tell me where, but they have taken out what they classified as a profitable filling station. So one of their Shell gas stations, petrol stations, whatever, and they've put in an electric only thing there. So it's with a Shell store like they would have in an ordinary one, but it's got rapid chargers under a solar canopy. It's somewhere within the M25. Excellent. So it's from an existing site. So I think it'll open next year. I mean, I think it's been delayed, I haven't heard, but I think that's the likely way that there'll be in urban centres where there's already some infrastructure of a similar nature. So there is a filling station, because there's actually not that many in London. When I remember I had a brief period where I had a car when I lived in London. The last year I lived in London, I had a car. Now there were not that many in the centre of London. There's very few places to fill a car with petrol. I used to get range anxiety. I didn't even know. But
it's interesting. Like one of the things in a city is around just the grid capacity. Yes. So we did a really cool piece of work. I mean, this was a couple of years ago now. The mayor, Sadiq Khan, I know you've interviewed on Fully Charged, when they released this, like the EV infrastructure delivery plan. But we did a really cool piece of work with one of the local energy distributor, UK Power Networks, and it's now available on open API, open data about which of the substations have spare capacity.
Right.
So, there's some areas with real dense population where that's a real issue, and it can be very, very expensive to do that. So just as a facilitative measure, we've now got a pretty good map. You can find it online to say, well, actually, where has the network got capacity to do things like rapid charging hubs? Yeah. Because that's one of the main constraints in city context.
Because that is, I mean, it's the scale of that. I do remember that. It's one of the peculiarities of the TV work I've done is very often if I walk past a building site, I'll get into a conversation with one of the blokes that works on it because they love scrap heap challenge or something. But there was one time I was walking down a street in London, there was a massive hole in the whole street was closed, big hole in the road, huge diggers and stuff. And they were putting in an electricity, I don't know what, main line, big flats, 3.5 million volts, just mind-boggling, huge thing. And he explained it to me. Of course, you can tell how much of that remained in my memory, but the scale, the complexity, the civil engineering involved in, and this was to reinforce the Paddington Basin. I seem to remember it was in that area. So there was a lot of new office buildings on what would have been railway sidings before the war, presumably, and it's now completely redeveloped. It's all big tower blocks. But clearly, when you build buildings that big, you've got to make sure there's enough power to light and heat them and everything, which is what they were doing. I mean, this is probably 15 years ago. This hole was there, but I didn't know you could have a wire that fat. That's what I remember. I could see the wire at the bottom of this hole, and they were joining two bits of wire together. Essentially, that's what they're doing. But wire that you can't imagine. I mean, it was as big as a car. It was a big fat wire with. He did tell me it's tens of thousands of volts goes through it to a substation somewhere. I don't know. But that infrastructure in a rural environment is quite easy to see. You see pylons. And they go down to a substation, and then the substation's there, then it goes off to, smaller wires to housing estates, to shops, whatever. But in an urban area like London, that's all buried, that stuff. It's all hidden from view, isn't it? You don't see it.
And it's absolutely. And it's obviously slightly easier if you kind of, in a back to base sort of duty cycle, like it could be a delivery van, or it could be a bus, or, close to where I am, I'm in the borough of Camden, Kentish Town, famously a UPS who were electrifying their delivery fleet. Yeah. It took them ages because they had to reinforce the substation, because they were going to so vastly increase power, and again, in city context, everything, like London, there's so much going on underground. There's the tubes and the sewers and a whole load of diverted rivers, and and finding how that is all put together it's actually really impressive to see, just the depth of knowledge about what is going on under the surface.
Yeah.
But it can be really, really complicated, and it gets harder as well when if you've got, say, private developers.
Yeah.
You've got to really push, I guess, planning guidance and the approach they're going to take, essentially to make, just to wire things up in case, or to be ready for the future.
Yeah.
And it's good now that the UK government has brought in that 2030 deadline.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden it brings it into, hold on, I really do need to plan for that.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see, like, car parks, new developments are just going to have to put the wiring in advance. Yeah. And that's one of the great powers of a signal from government like that, is that it affects a planning decision or an investment decision, that it creates that, I guess, physical but also behavioural architecture that people are going to be more ready, strategically more ready for when the vehicles come.
Yeah, because that is it's an endless discussion I'm involved in. Is when people say, well, most UK households don't have anywhere off the street to park and charge a car, which is not true. Now I know it's not most, it's a lot, but it's not most. It's actually a minority of them. But in London, it's got to be like 90% of London households. I wonder, do you know what the percentage is, within Greater London? It's got, no, maybe not 90%, but it's going to be a very high percentage of people that will, if they have a car, they park it on the street.
So there's actually, beginning in November, the ICCT, the International Council on Clean Transportation.
Oh, yeah.
They did a really, really interesting study on charging requirements in London.
Right. This is because I think this is a critical thing, but this applies to cities all over the world as well, doesn't it? It's not, but it's very interesting if you got the insight in London.
Yeah, and what you said, and again, I thought you might ask me, Robert, so I've got it open just next to me. And it's very interesting that there's two kind of lenses to think about. Firstly is, inner, more dense parts of London versus the outer suburbs.
Right. Yeah.
So it's very, very different. But looking at the kind of where you think the charging is going to be, energy demand. You look at behaviourally. We're mandating, for example, private hire vehicles, minicabs, and taxis, TNCs as they're called in America. They have to be zero emission capable.
Right.
And so you end up with these figures about how is it something like 900 or so gigawatt hours energy assumed to be going to EVs in, say, 2025,
right?
Of which 65-70% is probably going to be minicabs, TNCs, and taxis,
right?
Because that's the mandate, that's where it comes in first.
Yeah.
But you're actually going to, if you look at the energy demand, in inner London, we reckon about, the ICCT reckons, about 45-46% is going to have to be from public rapid chargers.
Right.
Because, public residential, that's about 30%. So not as many people have it. If you look at in outer London, it's very different. Whereas you might only need 20% or so of rapid chargers, and you can do, probably 30-40% in the home, right. And then other residential probably another 30-35%. So that's the broad. Those are the two lenses. Is what's the vehicle?
Yeah.
Because some will use it more quickly than others, and then which part of London are you in? And obviously in central London locations, you need everything. You're going to need the clever on-street stuff. That's I don't know, integrated with lampposts, other clever solutions like that. But in a place like London where it's quite dense, not everybody has off-street parking. I do think there is going to be a role. It's not the only solution, but there is definitely going to be a significant role for rapid charging hubs. Yeah,
no, absolutely. But I think is interesting because none of these topics ever occurred to my diminished brain before I drove an electric car. But the questions came up so quickly. Is oh my God, I never thought about where fuel came from before I had an electric car. It never just came from a garage. Stop at a garage, you pay them loads of money, you buy some smelly liquid, you put it in your car and you carry on. There was no backstory in my mind. And I am someone who, through professionally, was doing documentaries about backstory. Where do biscuits come from? How do you make tea bags? I've done, I think, one of the absolute quintessential pieces of where do tea bags come from TV. I'm very proud
wow. I have to check it on YouTube. I have to watch it.
I wonder if it is. It's How Do They Do It was the series, and I spent a long time with a tea. I blended some of my own tea, and they made some tea bags of my own Roberts blend of tea, which my wife said tasted like drain water. She wasn't very impressed. I thought it was rather delicate. Anyway, but I never thought about it until then I went to an oil refinery, and I went, oh, okay, this is where it's from, and you see the impact of that. But sorry, I'm trying to get back to the point is that the other thing that it completely revealed was, why would you own a car? Because I suddenly found out, it takes ever to charge a car. It's what you're always told, and particularly when you first have it. And my first electric car had a 3-pin socket specially installed. So it did take ages to charge a car. And then I went, that's still not that hard because I don't use the car that much. As in 90% of the time you've got it. So if you've got time in the 90% of the time you've got the car to charge it. So then you go, why am I owning a car? I don't want to own a car. I want to be able to use one when I need it and not when I don't. I mean, it's that side of it, because I think we still have that. Most people still are locked into that thing. Well, I'll own the car. Where am I going to park it? I'm going to have to leave it on the street. How do I charge it? And what if you didn't own a car? 1, 2, it drove to your house with no one in it, and you got in it and you drive it. 3, it charged itself somewhere else, which is, I mean, I've seen all this technology already exists, but it's then how you integrate that into a city the size of London is mind-boggling again.
Yeah, well, so look, I mean, it's that's when we've spoken about like electrification mostly so far, but that's when you get, if that was big revolution number 1.
Yes.
Then the next 2, number 2 is connectivity / automation, and then the third one is into the sharing economy. Like last mile, micromobility, and which I also set up in central government, by the way. I set up the Centre of Connected and Autonomous. I set up the Connected and Autonomous Vehicle Programme.
That's right. Yes. I want you to. I think you can rightly criticise some, commercial entrepreneurs for plugging their past glories. I think it's very legitimate for you to plug the things you've done, because you've achieved amazing things and very much under the public radar. That notion, when you think of sort of solutions for future personal transport in big cities, having there's just not enough room to have everyone have a private car. It just doesn't. There isn't now. I mean, when I lived in London for 14 years. I moved in and I had a little van that I lived, because I lived out in the sticks. I needed a van. Moved in with my van. It was a nightmare. Where do I park it? Oh, I've got to pay. Oh, I got rid of it as soon as I could. I sold it as quickly as I could and rode bikes and caught the bus. It was easy. That was less.
I mean, in a city, there's like a very clear hierarchy. So being active and healthy is the top of the pile, right? Then the most efficient way of getting people around is in public transport, mass transit. Bus, the underground. But even if we really double down on that, in London, the Mayor's transport strategy is targeting 80% of all trips should be in the sustainable manner, active travel, walking, cycling.
Right, basically not cars.
But even if you get to 80%, that's more than 1.2 billion car trips a year in London.
Right. Wow.
Right. And you have to do something with that.
Yeah.
And but you were talking about before, this idea of connectivity, automation, if it goes around. I think there's 2 things on that. Automation is really hard. It's really very, very hard. What I would say is that people talk about connected and autonomous, and as soon as you start with that agenda, everyone jumps to the march of the killer robot taxi, whatever. You're right, and that is really hard, but there's huge amounts of benefits in the connectivity piece on the way to that. So for road safety, for network management.
Yeah.
There's one thing at the moment, it'll come out soon, I can't talk about who we're doing it with, but the current car, the connected car, is this massive sensing object.
Yeah.
It knows what's happening on the road surface because of the wheels and anti-lock brakes. It's got the parking sensors are always active. It knows how fast you're pressing your foot on the accelerator pedal, or whether you're swerving the steering wheel. And there's something that we're doing at the moment, is that can you use that data proactively, preemptively, to work out where there might be dangerous things or dangerous situations or ineffective processes going on the road. And so, normally what happens, every accident is a tragedy, right? But the traditional approach is it happens. Yeah. Somebody to lose their life, you send an investigation team, and they go, "Oh yeah, we should have moved that fence." Right. Yes. And actually, we're starting a program now to, well, hold on, can we get this? And some of the preliminary data we've got is, do you know what? Actually, if loads of people are swerving their steering wheels, we haven't got a reported accident yet. Right. But let's just go and look at what's happening there. And there's one thing, I don't know if it's empirically valid yet, but there was one thing where, just as a case study, where we saw it was happening loads of what's going on. And there was a bit of roadworks further up the road. There was a little island with flower bed, further back, and people were using that as an informal, pedestrian crossing, and it was not designed for that. And so what I would say is that on the route to full automation, there's huge benefits in my view of connectivity, and then that's a safety application. You could apply it to network management. You could apply it to customer information about how do you get around a city most effectively. I think the other point I wanted to say on this, which I think is a significant barrier, because there is this vision of we don't own cars. As soon as you've finished using it, goes off to ferry somebody else around. You don't want to carry 3 empty seats in a car, so everyone fills up. There is a principle that is, you could call it the propensity to share, is how much would you actually be prepared to get in to a car that's driving itself with no taxi driver, no London cabbie in there to be another human present. How close are you prepared to sit to someone you don't know? Oh, I see. You don't mean a car on your own. You mean you're getting a car and there's 2 or 3 other people in it you've never met. All of those things. If it's my pride and joy is that I've got my Tesla. Do I really want someone else sitting in it for a while? Maybe not. Yeah. One step further, would you share space with somebody? Some people would, but some people won't. And I think just how realistic that a lot of people do it. They look into the middle distance and talk about this this vision of seamless zero emission shared transportation with, and it works. I think there's still quite a long customer journey to go through before people would be prepared to do that. And generationally, I think it's going to be. I think old codgers my age will have a real problem adjusting to that. I think because it's the variations of it. Because I always, first of all, when I had rides in fully autonomous cars, which one of them was through London. That was a Nissan Leaf that Nissan developed. Yeah, amazing. It worked, but then you go, this is a long way. I don't, that convinced me. 1, that the technology works, and 2, it's a long way off. It's not going to happen next week or next year. The amount of computers in the back of that car, the amount of technological development has got to be done to shrink that down to a manageable size. And then it reduced that car's range. That was a 40 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf that had about a 45 to 50 mile range. So that is how much juice those things. And when he opened the back, it was just fabulous. It was like a James Bond thing, but the noise it was making. So the fans, which I could hear when we were in the car, they were going like they're clappers, because it was, dealing with petabytes of data every minute. It was unbelievable. But the one solution I've seen, I went, that I can understand, which was at a talk in Amsterdam, I think, with slides. So I didn't see anything real, but that was from a Volkswagen engineer, and that is, we'll never make an autonomous car that carries people. We'll make an autonomous car that can arrive at your house, and then you get in and you drive it. You're responsible for that car. You're the driver,
in exactly the same way from an insurance point of view as you are now. And then you get out of that car and it's 100% not your responsibility, and it goes off and parks itself, charges, goes to someone else, whatever. And that their argument was that if they've got a car, that it is their responsibility as a company or whoever owns that car, whoever runs that service, for that empty car. So that's driving to come and get you, and a child runs out in front of it, and there's an old lady on the other side with a walking frame, and there's the primary school, all the scenarios that people come up with autonomous cars, and that car that is then capable of destroying itself to stop hurting anyone, because there's no one in it, so there's no danger to any human being in the car. So it will drive itself into a wall, or one of his extreme suggestions was there are explosive bolts in an extreme situation that fire down into the road. So it's doing 30 miles an hour, it goes, just stops. It's destroyed, it's wrecked, and it has to be lifted by a crane. He had slides for this. And I went, that is terrifyingly genius. But, you explain.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, when you start to carry humans around, it gets really tricky. But you see, I don't know, right? There's a lot of, companies doing interesting things where it makes a more immediate sense. Oxbotica, you must have spoken to those guys. It's actually it's like mining and logistics.
Yeah.
Totally, or what Arrival is talking about back at the depot. One of the most common ways buses get a prang is back at the depot, because it's all so tightly moved in. Yeah. And you can see that, it will snowball. It will move from efficiencies and kind of operational safety through to kind of incremental, when the operating domain is more simplified or at lower speeds in certain contexts. And then, the confidence will build, but it's hard to see, because ultimately from a regulation point of view as well, somebody somewhere has to say, yep, this is safe enough. This
is safe to do. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's, you can see in a system like aviation, right? There's a global system through the International Civil Aviation Organization, where if there's a crash anywhere internationally, there's a formal investigation. Those learnings are disseminated into the whole industry worldwide, and it works really well. It's highly automated. It's actually planes tend to be level 4, because there's always a human ready to take over. Yeah,
right.
Not even planes go on level 5.
Yes.
Automation.
Yes. Yeah.
But there is a really effective regulatory structure, and you can see, cars going to that structure as well.
Yeah.
But how long that transition will take, I don't know. If I knew that, if either of us knew that, we'd be in the money.
No, I can imagine. I'd love to be at the meeting between, say, let's just go with them, because I mentioned them before, Volkswagen, and they're now 100% autonomous ID4 with explosive deadbolts that can hammer it into the road to stop it killing people. And the regulatory authorities are going, so explain to us about these exploding bolts. There's a lot of...
Is this your way back into Scrap Heap Challenge? You can get an ID4.
I'd quite like to
and amend it. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be brilliant to build? I mean, it is something we're planning on doing next year. I hadn't thought of that, but actually build a simple car, convert a car to electric drive, and your challenge is to drive it at 60 miles an hour, and it's got to stop in the shortest distance. It can destroy itself, but it's got to go from 60 to 0 in literally 1 or 2 meters. How are you going to do that? It would be 2 huge prongs that go out the front, just dig in the road. It just crunches itself to. That would be. It would be dramatic to watch.
Definitely. I'm not be in the car.
Yeah, but anyway, that I think you're right, and that's what's going to be interesting is if the patterns of ownership of cars. I think that in a way, that's the biggest challenge that the human race has in a way, because as the middle, and this is global, not just London local, but as the expanding middle class in India and China, and their desire to have, like we were allowed to have them, and they want to have cars. And within days, their cities are jammed and absolutely choked to death with millions and millions of cars. And as a transport system, I'm sure this is what your whole shtick, but it doesn't work. If everyone has private cars, your city doesn't work. Your transport system.
True. So tell me, what do you think of electric scooters then?
So I was lucky enough to be in Brisbane, which is where my wife is from, last year. So January of 2019. and they had just installed, I think it was Lime, had just been allowed to run Lime scooters within a certain area of the city. And we were living sort of in the central area, an area called New Farm in Brisbane. Beautiful suburb, but very central to Brisbane. So the first thing I noticed was a young man with tattoos and a man bun went up the hill we were living on, riding 2 scooters at once with 2 more hooked over his shoulder. Amazing speed. I went, what the heck? And I thought it was a vehicle. What it was he was one of the people that they employed at night. This was generally in the evening. It was really hot. Zooming there to his house where he plugs them in overnight. But he wasn't just carrying one. He had 4 with him, and he was riding 2 at once. I mean, that's quite a skill. He looked very cool. So then I started using them. They're very easy to use, and I absolutely love them. And I'm quite nervous of 2-wheeled vehicles in general, and particularly ones that have got 2 small wheels that look a bit like skateboards with a handlebar, because I'm dangerous anywhere near a skateboard. I can fall over when I look at a skateboard, let alone get on it. So my son was a very keen skater. So I know, but it was wonderful. And then every now and then there would be such a frightening moment when there was a pedestrian scooter interaction where I didn't quite see the person. And there were very strict regulations. And there was one brilliant route that I could get right into the middle of Brisbane on a scooter route or a bicycle route. There were no pedestrians. And that was perfect. I wasn't scared then. But when you're on the sort of street, Brisbane isn't designed for it. Brisbane's built for cars, absolutely 100%. And so that felt a little bit risky, because that's the thing I loved. Well, I didn't even know you'd done it, but the cycle route along the embankment, I didn't see that being developed. I just got on a bike one day in Bermondsey and rode to Paddington. I went, oh my God, this is brilliant. Because I wasn't about to get crushed by a truck or a taxi any second, because I was on a special bike path, which is, so it's that separation.
Yeah.
That's what immediately you think, how do you separate pedestrians, scooters, cars, scooters and bikes, and then cars? You want to keep them well apart, which is very difficult in a medieval city.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've been grappling with that in London specifically. So
because you've just introduced scooters recently.
Well, we've just launched a trial. So in the UK, we have this archaic law. I think it's the 1835. I can't remember if it's the Highways Act or something like that. And it's because in those days, one of the reasons was that people were being knocked off bridleways into canals by these newfangled carriages, right?
Right.
And it's been illegal to ride anything on any vehicle on the pavement, on the sidewalk.
Right.
It's only ever been changed once. That's for mobility scooters, and then they're not legal on the road either. They're not classified as a vehicle. So if you ride an electric scooter that you privately own on the road, you can get halfway to having your license removed. You can get 6 points on your driver's license.
Wow.
A fine of £200. Yeah, it's still technically. Don't buy one for Christmas.
No, because I have seen. The last time I was in London, I haven't been there very much. On Westbourne Grove, a man went past in the middle of the street on a scooter, standing up. He was doing 35 miles an hour.
Yeah. But what's happened?
So he could get points on his license for doing that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and a big fine. So what's happened is that nationally, the government has started to open the door to making them legal. But there's going to be the only way to do it to start off with is through like a city authorised trial.
Right.
And actually, we thought really hard about it because we're nervous because on the one hand, some people love them, and it might be a way of getting out of a car trip. At the moment, post COVID, everyone wants to find a way of getting around the city in an innovative way.
Yes.
Right? That's great. But there's a genuine safety concern about them. We don't know. Exactly what the relative safety is compared to bicycles, for example. And also, I've got a sneaky suspicion that a lot of people will do it instead of walking.
Yes.
I think a lot of people won't just get out of the car.
Yeah.
So we thought, what should we do? Should we try and do nothing? Well, no, because as you observe, people are buying them and people are using them.
Yeah.
We didn't want to take a light touch like it was with dockless bikes because that was a mess and they were strewn everywhere.
Yeah.
And until we know exactly what the law is going to be. So we decided, us along with the London councils and all the London boroughs, we said, well, look, let's try and do a trial that really indexes safety as the highest thing. So really, the highest quality vehicles we can get, probably with slightly bigger wheels than the ones you might see in the people use privately. And the thing about batteries, you're moving to a situation where rather than lugging all of the scooters all over the place, if you have swappable batteries, it actually reduces that. And we're doing all sorts of things as well. Like, we want to make sure that the vehicles they use for redistributing their scooters are environmentally friendly. So the competition's out. I guess the operators are busily writing their bids right now, but it's not in all London boroughs. We've got a third of the London boroughs so far. I think quite a few more will join, and you'll be able to rent one legally. It's the only legal way to do it.
Right.
In the spring. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm going to come and have a go, but I'm going to bring my gloves and helmet, because I think those are very important things to wear when you're on. Because I ride a bike still in London have done when I have been in London. But then, so then the other topics I just want to quickly cover, because I think there's so many aspects to kind of personal transport in the cities. But I mean, the two that I see changing fastest, I want to start with one, which is the new London taxi, the electric taxi, which I know is a range extended electric taxi. But what is amazing is when I first saw that, I thought, this is so good. No one's going to buy this. It's more expensive and it's not going to be popular, and the cabbies won't do them. And I don't know how many there are on the streets of London, but a lot. It is exactly the opposite of what I expected.
There's about 4,000 now. There's about 4,000 of them. There's black taxis. There's something like, I can't remember the exact number, 21,000 maybe. And you can't get a new one now unless it's reservation capable.
Right.
And the last figures I saw were like at the end of October, and it was 3,900. So I imagine it'd be over 4,000 now.
But I thought what I loved about that was that it's electric, and it's got a range extender, all right, so all that, but it's mainly electric because it does 70-80 miles. I think even the grumpy taxi cabbies I've been in with them will say it basically lasts a day if you're working in central London. If you have to go out to Heathrow or one of the airports, then it's a bit different. But they're electric. They're also much, much nicer than any other taxi I've ever been in.
It's beautiful. It's great. I mean, they're quiet. They've got that amazing panoramic roof.
The roof is fabulous. Yeah.
And actually, it seats six. You can, and it becomes productive time. Yeah. And I think that's what. I was really pleased with the design as well. I think because the London taxi is so iconic.
Yeah.
I think they've done a really good job of bringing
that. Then there's buses, and I just wanted to check with you about that. But I mean, I've now caught two by chance, not design, and we are going to make a show about electric buses in London and the charging infrastructure, really how they manage that, and also as they called it, bus. Is it Jenga or bus? What's the game? I've forgotten the name. Where you have to fit.
Tetris.
What is it? Tetris. Bus Tetris, which is what they have to play at the depots, which is, and exactly that was, I was told when we talked to someone recently about how they charge buses. They say this is where all the dents and bashes happen to buses, never on the streets, always when we're playing bus Tetris. But that, how soon will there be? Because that is still a thing. I've been cycling down Westbourne Grove and a bus overtakes me, and I can smell it. It's a diesel, and it says clean diesel on the back, and you're going, that's not,
Yeah, well, so we've already moved to a position where all of the new single deckers zero emission,
right,
and then and all the double deckers are at least hybrid at the moment.
Yeah,
we've got like fully electric. I think it's getting on for 400 now. It's in the 370s with the fully electric, aiming for 2,000 fully electric by 2025.
Right.
But then everything hybrid, and there's a question right now about how soon do we electrify the whole thing. And the current targets are will be reviewed today, but our old plans were by 2037. But that's all wrapped up in who's going to be the next mayor and what funding is going to be from central government. And so at the moment there's a lot of uncertainty. But what I would just say is that you have to remember that people on a bus, in terms of CO2 per passenger kilometre is still a heck of a lot better than a car. You know, if you've got 20, 30 people. So, but you're right. But look, it's getting a huge amount better. But it's complex. One of the key things is, you know, wiring up all the bus garages.
Yeah.
We own some of those. The bus operators own some of those, and as you say, I mean, you should go and have a look. One that's easy to go and have a look at is the one by Waterloo. It's a fantastic place. I think I don't want to get the name wrong. I think it's First Group.
Quick editing note: it's not First Group; it's actually the Go Ahead Group.
Right.
And they've got, you know, they've just completely wired up that bus garage. Wow. It's a completely electric bus garage, and it's fantastic, really.
Yeah.
Because you remember that central London experience of, you know, you're standing by a bus and as it kicks off that puff of soot. And it's just so seamless, and the passenger experience is really good. Yeah. So we want to do it as quickly as we can afford, I suppose, is the harsh reality.
I mean, I think that's the battering we've all taken this year. You know, is that there's no question that whatever else happens, you know, I'm very happy about the vaccinations and all that, but the economy of every country has taken a massive hit, and I think that, you know, it's, you know, all the expansion plans that we had on Fully Charged this year didn't happen, and we had a lot of them, and they've been delayed, and we hopefully will manage to catch up a bit. But that's a microcosm of what's happening on a national and then an international level. Is that I think it's set back a lot of those things, but it feels like it hasn't set back electrification of transport as much as other sectors. That's still growing. I mean, the latest sales figures for electric cars, even though we've just been talking about how people shouldn't own cars, you know, they are really impressive. They're still going up. It's a huge increase over this time last year. You know, which I'm amazed at. I'm so amazed anybody's buying anything.
Yeah, but you see, you know, you're right. You know, in the COVID world, I mean, we're just sort of coming out of second lockdown, and I've just seen the data this morning. You know, tube travel is like 30% of what it used to be. Bus travel is about 50% of what it used to be.
Right.
It's a huge hit for us. You know, business is also affected, but it's interesting. I'm actually really bullish about this agenda, you know, the sort of the future mobility agenda, because one thing that we have learned in this process is that, you know, we can work remotely. This whole last mile delivery culture, I think, has been radically accelerated. So this whole agenda of, you know, electrification, you know, urban deliveries, urban freight, you know, efficient last mile transport, micro mobility.
Yeah.
You know, there's questions now about the size of the overall economic pie, but I think this bit of it is going to get bigger. Definitely relatively. I think probably in absolute terms as well, is that, you know, these trends have been radically accelerated. So I think actually this space, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty about the world, but one of the features of what we as humanity have experienced is that this stuff is going to happen bigger and quicker.
Yeah, than anyone thought. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, because that's the thing. I mean, if anything, I could be accused of being a, you know, wishy-washy techno-optimist. And actually, in my most optimistic techno-optimism, I didn't think it would happen this quick. You know, when you go and see something like the Gridserve charging hub, I didn't expect to see that for years. I mean, that is, you know, really a big thing. It's a real pivotal moment. And you're absolutely right. We need those in the middle of cities to enable more people to be able to use electric cars easier. But actually, the fact that it's anywhere is, I still think, remarkable. You know, because that's the sort of, you know, there's one in the Netherlands that's already there. And actually, this is bigger because the Netherlands, you know, when they do car charging, there's an amazing company called Fastned in the Netherlands that have got one charger in Sunderland here. And they're, you know, just a completely different mindset behind it. Same as Gridserve in a way, but the Gridserve charger is currently bigger than anything Fastned have put in.
Yeah, well, it's cool. But one thing I've learned, you know, in this was actually harking back to when I first joined. Like one of my first ever meetings, I was like, you know, coming into civil service, It was when it was a meeting with the SMMT, the Society for Motor Manufacturers and Trade, right at the beginning. And it, when they had their old office, some ancient panelled.
Yes, I've been there. Yes, no, it's very.
It's like it's a very austere building. Old leather-bound chairs and a big dark wood table, and it was all men, relatively old men. And I remember being utterly terrified, and I kind of got this wagging finger, don't push this, we have to support the industry and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then a wise old civil servant said to me, just remember that engineers are brilliant, and if you push them and give them a date and give them a target,
they'll do it.
Human ingenuity will find a way.
Yeah.
And the prices will be 3 times less than they feared, and the timescales, all of a sudden they'll find a way of doing it when you felt it was impossible. And that was the thing, always remember, as long as you set the right target, engineers will solve your problem. So that. But I carried that with me when I was in those uncomfortable moments when it's like,
yes,
she needs to be too far here, and it's no. I don't want to talk to the government relations person that tells me how impossible it is. I want to speak to your head of engineering, because they're going to be an engineer. They're really excited.
They want a big problem to solve. No, you're absolutely right, and that was a brilliant piece of advice, because it's very hard to see that if you don't know. I mean, I learnt that from working with engineers on Scrap Heap for years. That was what they loved, was when they were told something was impossible or really hard to do or it's never going to happen. That's when they got excited. I'd get depressed. I go, you're probably right. And they go, oh, brilliant. Is it impossible? Let's try it. Totally different attitude. It took me a long time to understand that. But Michael, I mean, I want you to become a regular guest on the Fully Charged Show podcast, because it's absolutely fascinating. Well, your insights are so different to either industry or pontificating Knowles like me. It's really interesting to have. Well, I really hope you enjoyed that. I think Michael is a dude. I've always been a big fan. I've sat next to him on many a panel in the olden days when we used to have panels. People would sit on panels and discuss things. And he always knew more than anyone else and was really kind and non-judgmental about it. Such a lovely fella. Anyway, that's all. We'll be back next week with, I think, possibly a news catch-up with just me. And then we've got a lot of other very interesting guests lined up on the Fully Charged Show podcast. So please do stay tuned. And as always, if you have been, thank you for listening.